This is the original story that inspired this trilogy. At first, on the surface, I thought the telling would be simple, but as I researched and dug deeper and even deeper, made contact with the victims, to whom I made a promise to keep anonymous, and even Julie herself, I realized that the story was much more than a simple telling of circumstance, that there were, and are, many different contributing factors to bring this story, Julie, to where she is now. The first two parts in this series can be watched independently of each other, even of this episode. However, I feel as though the telling of the story of Synanon and Elan School, and all their atrocities, will bring proper context to all that's happened. There are many moving parts to this story. It's a delicate and serious matter that is still ongoing. The trial for Julie's charges has yet to begin. I promised the victim that I would keep him anonymous, and have crafted this script in such a way that I believe I have done so. Out of respect for all he has gone through, I have limited the amount of information I have used, and attempted to walk the razor wire with care and tact, which I hope I have done. I know they are subscribed to my channel, and I hope I've done this story justice. And now, for the final installment of the ElanDslide trilogy, Julie Merar, with something criminal.
This video, it's really not for you. This video is for me. I've gotta get this out of my head. Yep. I gotta get this all out of my head. Yeah, I think that's what it is. It's just inside of my head. I gotta get it all out. You're so good at it. All the sly little comments. Why did you do this to me?
Each member of the Congress has a role to play in modernizing our defenses, thus supporting our chances for a meaningful arms agreement. Your vote this spring on the Peacekeeper missile will be a critical test of our resolve to maintain the strength we need and move toward mutual and verifiable arms reductions. For the past 20 years, we've believed that no war will be launched as long as each side knows it can retaliate with a deadly counterstrike. Well, I believe there's a better way of eliminating the threat of nuclear war. It is a strategic defense initiative aimed ultimately at finding a non-nuclear defense against ballistic missiles. It's the most hopeful possibility of the nuclear age, but it's not very well understood. Some say it will bring war to the heavens, but its purpose is to deter war in the heavens and on Earth. Now, some say the research would be expensive, perhaps, but it could save millions of lives, indeed humanity itself. And some say if we build such a system, the Soviets will build a defense system of their own. Well, they already have strategic defenses that surpass ours, a civil defense system where we have almost none, and a research program covering roughly the same areas of technology that we're now exploring. And finally, some say the research will take a long time. Well, the answer to that is, let's get started.
The 1980s, the era of breaking boundaries, and people were stepping away from generational traditions, a hard-fought battle on the heels of the psychedelic-driven 60s and the tail end of the toxic 70s. Society in America fractured into very distinct lines of thinking. Alongside the easing of Cold War tensions, Reaganomics brought about a complete reform on taxes and trading, introducing the NASDAQ market system, while the First Lady, Nancy Reagan, broke long-standing traditional molds of how a First Lady should act and started her own crusade on social issues like conservatism and the war on drugs, famously coining the term, "just say no."
So open your eyes to life, to see it in the vivid colors that God gave us as a precious gift to His children, to enjoy life to the fullest and to make it count. Say yes to your life, and when it comes to drugs and alcohol, just say no.
Hey, Davey, get lost, will you? Hey, let the kid in.
Hey, I know.
What are you doing?
Hey, Davey, wanna try something?
Hey, come on, man, leave him alone.
Come on, try it, Davey.
I don't like this.
Try it. Come on, take it.
No thanks.
Kid's gonna be alright. If someone offers you drugs, what is it with you guys? Just say no.
And the vast majority of American society was ready for change. Reagan and all his initiatives just made sense. And in parallel with all the pioneering moves forward, the age of electric Kool-Aid gave way to pop culture. Things like fashion, music, and technology were now part and parcel to mass media, and the new generation of babysitters were born. Attention was easily diverted, and ignorance became bliss. Society on the whole was caught in the age of ego, commercialism, and self-driven motive. People began pushing boundaries, broadening the scope of what used to constitute as everyday life, and with that, out came the wolves. Bold, and for a while, in the open, without any notice. The masses might have been concerned, but it was far easier to focus on their own lives. If it didn't directly affect them, why bother? The 80s, for all its current-day nostalgia, were filled with straw-grasping initiative and boundary-breaking rule. Things like homosexuality were starting to take bold footsteps to the forefront, but not without violent backlash. The devil's music really became the devil's music. Drugs were now wholly commonplace with government-funded controversy like the Cuban incident. And people, at least in some circles, were no longer people, rather viewed as cattle, exploited, distributed, abused. Julie Merar never stood a chance. Born on September 26, 1975, it's very difficult to separate fact from fiction with Julie and her life, although it's safe to say that she experienced extraordinary hardship that would shape and evolve into something fierce, a lasting, chaotic, and wanting boon. Born in the 70s, Julie was a product of confused upbringing, with a loving, although absent father who worked away from home, and a controlling and viciously self-serving mother. They were not poor. Julie's father was successful at his job and always made sure to provide, even through his constant absence. But this left Julie at home with her mother the lion's share of the time, and her mother's attentions were anywhere but with Julie, until they weren't. The kind of love and attention Julie would receive was anything but wholesome. She would claim later in life that her mother was abusive, and it's hard to determine exactly how, but a few things are for certain. Julie was the subject of familial abuse over the course of her 8 youngest years, allegedly sexual in nature. The inevitable deep cuts and wounds to come from this stay as lasting and often visible scars. During a time when children naturally seek direction from their betters, the ones they should find shelter with, their protection, their guardians, there to shield their progeny from the pains of the real world, Julie was alone. A child's development is dependent on their betters. There needs to be consistency, a static role model that paves the road for everything to come after. Their brains are alive with freshly firing neurons, forging pathways in their minds that will forever shape the way they view the world. Cause and effect. Although at that age the ism works both ways. The effect can quickly become the cause, and without correction and proper guidance, love and attentive care, the most primal of instincts takes over: survival. Humans, even in our infant stages, have the unique ability to adapt, and while some might transcend their trauma, most only learn to mask it. Trust isn't something easily restored, and when it's the ones tasked to protect you that break it, rarely does it ever return. People become the enemy, even those who would save you. That isn't to say parenting is easy. It's natural to feel frustrated with the chaotic and unbridled wanting of a child. The learning process is equal for parent and kin alike. But parenthood should build character, awaken the natural maternal or paternal instinct to provide and protect. These trials for both parent and child are the chains that bind, and in most cases help to develop mechanisms of growth, molding and shaping both parent and kin alike with the tools needed to conquer the world. In the worst of scenarios, littered with trauma and neglect, the trials of trauma become a crown of thorns, worn and ever-present, often mistaken by those on the outside as simply rebellious nature, the mask that the broken wear. And as a child struggles their way into their teens, this circumstance of house and home most typically becomes rebellion, refined, vicious, and resentful. Sometimes, in the most rare of cases, the horrors of all the closed doors, the tribulations of the innocent, are well hidden. But look closely, and you might see trauma on their faces, in how they hold themselves, in their speak, their walk, in their eyes.
The thing that's important in appreciating the development of trauma within children is that there's such a huge variation in human behavior and human development at all ages. So it's critically important to be able to sort out what is kind of normal for children and what is not. Nightmares, for example, are very common. They don't necessarily have to be associated with a traumatic event, although they are. So the emergence really is the notion of how the child is attempting to cope, and their normal, natural capacity to cope is failing them. So there are one of the most, I think, important over time is the loss of sleep. The child is afraid to go to sleep, unable to stay asleep, wakes up and wants to be comforted more frequently. That's a sign, because it's not only associated with events, but also with events that they anticipate. Because that's another risk factor that children face, is not just the past trauma, but the potential for future trauma, and therefore anxiety and worry about that.
Miraculously, or perhaps selfishly, Julie's mother eventually gave her away to the system, a foster child. While it might not have been her mother's intention, in the least it saved Julie from the maternally violent hand and familial abuse. And despite the separation, her mother never entirely abandoned Julie, buying her gifts and doting on her, perhaps a way to appease her own guilt. Although this most certainly had a negative effect on Julie's mindset. A strange division between wants and needs, the former overshadowed by her mother's distant pandering. What Julie must have wanted, like any child coming of age, was motherly love, direction, and importantly, protection. Instead, she was given maternal placeholders which succeeded only in building imaginary worlds, backed by strange and outrageous justifications from Julie about the world she claimed to come from. And stuff can be a thing of status to teenagers, an easy way to elevate yourself. The flash and dazzle of brand name clothes, a fancy new Walkman, maybe your own color TV. In truth, however, Julie most likely felt discarded and paid off. Thrust from one home to another, the trauma in Julie's life continued. Being a patron of the state may not shock the masses like familial abuse would, but it can be just as damaging. This road she was forced upon would manifest in ugly ways as she made passage into her teenage years, and Julie would naturally embrace a more rebellious way of life. More than just a curious teen on the shoulder years of experimentation, with Julie, it was both her title and escape. These fingers of experimentation stretched farther and farther for her, becoming arms and torso, filling out legs and head. The figurative limbs of abuse became Julie's persona. Maxing out at 4'9", she was a tiny girl, and often, during the height of experimentation and substance abuse, she would drink herself to the point of hospitalization. Attending nurses and doctors would then see the cuts and slashes Julie had given herself, learn about her aversion to sleep, and about how, when she did, she would often experience night terrors. Sadly, no action was taken. These calls for help are common actions when born from destructive hardship. Trauma and trauma-based thinking make it very hard for an individual to connect with anyone or anything for too long before chaotic doubt and fierce mistrust rolls in. Arm's length is the safest distance. Vulnerability is only weakness on broadcast, and the protective boundaries that a traumatized individual can project are like a cross they bear that rarely lifts. And if it does, it's never for very long. Isolation can easily become one's warm blanket, the easiest way to cope.
Exposure to trauma is common amongst young people, so we know that by the end of adolescence, about 75% of young people will have faced some kind of traumatic event. Immediately after a traumatic event, all children are likely to feel frightened, distressed, and in shock. Most will recover well with the support of family and friends. The reactions that young people can experience after a trauma can be really broad, but we know that there are some responses that are more common.
Young people will often see vivid images in their mind after a trauma, but they might also hear, feel, or smell things that happened during the event. These memories are experienced as uncontrollable and have a here and now quality, so it could almost feel like the trauma is happening again. Young people might experience changes in thinking and attitudes after a trauma. Survivors have learned that life is fragile, so they might see the world as a dangerous place. Many young people feel guilty and blame themselves for things that did or didn't happen during the traumatic experience. Children might notice changes in their body, feeling more jumpy or easily startled. Reminders of the event might make them feel panicky. They can have difficulty sleeping and find it hard to concentrate at school. Changes in mood and feelings also often follow a traumatic experience. Young people can be sad and withdrawn as well as irritable, becoming snappy or oppositional with their parents or siblings. Avoidance is a common response to trauma. Children will work hard to push horrible pictures from their mind. They might also try to avoid reminders of the event, and that can really restrict day-to-day life. Young people may not want to talk about the trauma, meaning adults often underestimate the extent of a young person's suffering.
Julie would be brought to multiple psychiatrists, mental health centers, and a plethora of treatments for her wild and destructive nature were explored. Speaking never helped. It's natural for any teen to remain guarded about their turmoil, and even more so for teens whose turmoil is trauma-induced. But it's the late 80s, the early 90s, and it's the height of the pharmaceutical market boom. New and designer drugs, forced through clinical trials and quickly to market, became a knee-jerk choice for those desperate for change. Julie was prescribed a number of drugs to try and lift the clouds that seemed to perpetually hang, including fluoxetine, or Prozac, the psychological wonder drug of the era. Prozac, a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, or SSRI, was one of the many pharmaceuticals that was rushed through trials and quickly to market, without anything more than surface-level research. The side effects seemed mostly safe, and the benefits far outweighed the alternative, and gave hope to both patient and doctor alike that finally there was a powerful and viable treatment available for people suffering from things like depression and trauma. And the results were positive across the board, mostly, for the short term at least. Although, something neglected with the introduction of Prozac was how the long-term effects of the numbing and flatline broad sweep could have on a developing mind. In short, how restricting a young mind with a drug could very well bypass the important development landmarks that a child or teen's mind needs to be able to properly function as an adult. Regardless, the FDA ruled the benefit greater than the loss, and even today, the long-term effects of SSRIs on children and teens is in high dispute. At one point in Julie's junior high years, amidst a sea of acquaintances labeled as friends, peers held at arm's length, she thought she found someone she could trust. A real friend. Someone who did not judge her, who seemed to only want the best for her, and importantly, was in Julie's corner. Ride together, die together is what she thought. Eventually, Julie felt comfortable enough to confide, and revealed the source of her trauma, the continued sexual abuse while living at home. You would think that this friend would sympathize, be Julie's support, her crutch, something Julie had been missing her entire life. Instead, this friend circulated the gossip around school, and Julie, already branded by action, was even more estranged. It's a horrific thing to have your trust in someone broken like that, in the worst of ways. To feel like all they shared was just a ruse, an elaborate plan to expose them. The burning of bridges always highlights the valley in between, and everything on the other side seems blurry, distant, and far away. Answers seem equally as distant, leaving at least one party with only their thoughts. This type of occurrence was, unfortunately, common in Julie's life. A trend, the dine and dash, and undoubtedly shaped Julie's inner perception of the world around her in destructive ways. A far cry from the development most children endure. A few scuffed knees, a little high school drama, the inherent teenage belief that you truly know it all. These are just a few of the rites of passage necessary for everything that comes after, learning to adapt, to grow and learn. Abuse, trauma, teaches someone much different things. With all of their attempts at treatment failing, when Julie was 15, she was removed from the public school system and given residential placement at Arden Shore, a storied institution that, once upon a time, was a school for the gifted, until changing its focus onto the emotionally disturbed, coining its treatment as positive peer culture. Now, Arden Shore is more of a halfway home and haven for teens who experience trauma or abuse at home or with their family. Arden Shore now focuses on home rehabilitation, and if that doesn't or simply can't work, it acts as a residence for teens awaiting placement in a foster home. The facility is, and always has been, a full-cycle establishment, with a school program and resident counselors available to every one of its attendees. Julie would bounce from foster home to foster home. Consistency was far from present in her life. And Julie's personality has always been much bigger than life itself, with all the charm when she wanted, and plenty of fight when she didn't. Sometimes lofty, oftentimes ambivalent. During her time in the system at Arden Shore, she brought with her bundled and misguided teenage pride. And while the program itself had some positive effect, it might have been too lenient, too forgiving, and Julie exploited that weakness. Seeing great opportunity in the method, but deciding Julie needed a stricter environment, it was ultimately decided that Julie attend Elan School, a militant boarding house founded by Joseph Ricci and Gerald Davidson that focused on putting the onus on the teenagers themselves to both succeed and, strangely, run the school itself. Here, there was hope that, under watchful eye and threat of immediate and inescapable discipline, Julie might learn how to operate as a team, to gain the skills needed to adapt or simply not react to unfavorable situations or thought.
Actually, just recently, I had access to my psychiatrist's recommendation to send me to Elan. And the recommendation specifically stated that I needed a warm psychotherapeutic environment that was structured, and that anything outside of this would probably lead to me killing myself. You know, I didn't have a great life. I was sexually abused, I was physically abused. I actually was recently diagnosed with PTSD. I suffer from severe anxiety. I have night terrors. And most of the time I'm dreaming about Elan.
Elan was born from a broken model of recovery, first introduced to the masses by Charles Dietrich, founder of the Synanon cult. In theory, on paper, the method makes sense, forcing an individual to be accountable for every action, to face the hard truths with no punches held. And while some sister institutions would use and amend the controversial processes with varying degrees of success, most were caught in a capitalistic web where money trumped recovery, and the lasting traumas the patients and attendees experienced never made the headlines it should have. Elan's adapted model of the Synanon method was not so different than the program developed by Dietrich, using a twisted concept of self-reliance and accountability. Although at Elan, instead of being open to anyone seeking treatment, the school focused solely on troubled teens, many of which, if not all, were brought there against their will. Elan was the school of the hardest knocks. Hordes of children overseen by a handful of absent adults. Their expectation that the kids learn to adapt and conform under vicious rule, upheld by the children themselves. Joseph Ricci, the key founder of Elan, famously adopted the mentality of act like a criminal, be treated like a criminal.
If he wants to act like a criminal, he'll be treated like a criminal. It's that basic. Now, if that is robbing him of his dignity and robbing him of his freedom, then yes, I'm guilty of it.
To Joe, all residents were criminals, regardless of status. His ultimate goal, a military-like rule where residents were stripped of their individuality, broken down to nothing, and forced to climb through a number of responsibility and freedom-giving ranks, ruthlessly following the footsteps of those before them, learning to bite or be bitten. This was the only route to graduation.
Why is it so much fun for you to be miserable? And what do you get out of it?
In the Elan system of relentless emotional pressure, the ultimate tool is the general meeting. Prompted by staff members, the entire household confronts a single resident. The purpose is to force her to reveal her deepest feelings about herself.
You just better start being honest with us, man, because everyone here's getting pretty hostile.
I get hostile because I look at you as an ingrate. Right, I look at you as a brat. I look at you as a spoiled brat.
You have nothing inside here. Just a selfish little spoiled leech is what you are. If you think people, are going to, give you and get you in this, you're out of your mind, you know what I mean?
Many students would attempt escape, opting for the trials of the streets over the tribulations of the school, but none were successful. Hunted down and brought back by their peers, usually kicking and screaming, knocked down to the lowest levels once again. Conform or be reformed. Unsurprisingly, very few students would graduate, learning only more mistrust in the world that turned its back on them, carrying with them the lasting trauma of their ordeal. Elan did very little good for most of its residents, and Julie is no exception. It is without a doubt that her experience at Elan only heightened her trauma, furthered her mistrust in people, taught her about cold resilience in the worst of ways. If there was a glass half full to her time at Elan, for anyone at Elan for that matter, she made it out alive, battered and beaten, but alive.
When I left Elan, I did not leave on good terms. My parents would not allow me to come home because I didn't graduate. And I was hitchhiking around and went to some dead shows, but I was homeless for a couple of years.
Once free from the shackles of other people's will as an adult, Julie would choose the life of a nomad, traveling with friends, sometimes lovers, and possibly even strangers, seeing sights, festivals, and concerts all over the United States, Costa Rica, Bulgaria, and more. Chasing dreams, or running from reality. The open road and rootless ambition was what drove her, reaching wildly for all the things she felt were missing, settling down only long enough for her to know she wanted to leave. Independence was finally hers, and she would stretch her wings wide on the coattails of true freedom of choice. Like most wild hearts, Julie would eventually settle down, mostly and sort of focused on career. She had always been creative, with a loud voice and determined nature, which lent well to outreach and marketing, and she would leverage this inherent ability to secure prestigious positions within a number of companies as their SEO strategist or content director. Julie would bounce from one company to another, sometimes working for more than 3 different firms in a year. Perhaps this was her own decision, her nomadic nature never keeping her in one place for too long before she felt spent. Or perhaps, as is with most numbers-focused industries, you're only as good as your last P&L or sale, and was asked to move on. Regardless, she would make a big splash with every entry, and earned many glowing testimonials from the companies she worked for. However chaotic, things were coming together for Julie. When she glowed, she shined, and could be very magnetic. In her spare time, which would bounce between plenty and none, she would choose people over pain, centering the lion's share of her life around helping others, volunteering, helping the homeless, and eventually putting her natural creativity to work, poetry, blogging, and writing for a number of publications based around wellness and promoting kindness, including a resident position with the Daily Herald. For Julie, there was really only one missing thing: that white picket fence and family in tow, something she dreamed of. And when it was time, when she was ready, in between ever-changing jobs and mission outreach, she did eventually find love. Slavi, a Bulgarian living on American soil, would steal her heart and every thought, and together they were a powerful and dynamic pair. All at once adventurous and carefree, they would travel the world, sometimes committing to extended stays, expanding already worldly views, experiencing culture and bathing in beauty. Together, they created many great memories, and marriage was inevitable, telegraphed from the moment they first held hands. Julie would bear 2 children for Slavi. And for a while, Julie lived the life she wanted. A stable home with 2 adorable children, a loving and attentive husband, a career that allowed for perpetual travel, and she was giving back to the world that had taken so much from her. Julie was happy. Nothing lasts forever, sadly, and with life, permanency is its greatest prank. The mask that Julie wore would soon fade and shatter, and the demons of her past would push to the surface, once again rearing their ugly heads. The trauma of Julie's formative years was constant, and always had been, hidden beneath the guise of an outwardly positive individual.
Most of the time, I'm dreaming about Elan. My husband wakes me up a lot saying that I was screaming, and I truly think that if it wasn't for my husband's patience and love and understanding, that I really think that doctor's report probably would be true. I probably would have killed myself by now.
However strong she might have been, it was inevitable her coping mechanisms would begin to fail. Without constant treatment, walls were bound to crumble, and while her heart might have been in the right place, it's safe to assume that her head was locked in a constant spin, running a circle of self-doubt, mistrust, and chaotically altered perspective, over and over again.
I debated making this video, really debated, because let's face it, I am 99.999% sure that you just pretty much don't give a fuck. I mean, maybe 3 weeks ago you gave a fuck, well, maybe this percent of a fuck, but in all honesty, I'm pretty sure you don't give a fuck. And this video, it's really not for you. This video is for me. I've got to get this out of my head. Yep. Like, why did you target me? And I know that you're gonna sit there. You're gonna deny every little thing, because that's what men like you do. You deny everything. That's what you do. You deny it. You say that you didn't do anything, right? That just happened. She just went crazy. She just decided that there was something going on between us. It was all in her head. But that's not true, and you know it. Why did you fucking target me? You know, fuck. I gotta tell you, everything was going fine. 10 years. 10 years of fucking working on myself, right? More than 10 years. Working through everything. Working through all of the emotional abuse I went through, all of the physical abuse, mental abuse, sexual abuse, the torture I fucking dealt with. I worked through all of that. Like I told you, in a box, neat little bow up on a fucking shelf. I was doing fine, right? Going through life, fucking kids, job, marriage wasn't great, but whatever, not everything can be perfect. Just going along. And in just fucking 4 months, you undid all of that. I thought I was so fucking strong. A fucking survivor. That nothing could fucking beat me. That's what I thought. And you undid all of that in 4 fucking months. I swear. I don't even know how that fucking happened. But you targeted me. You saw something in me. All the fucking backhanded compliments, the insults, you started from fucking day one. And I have the memory for it, right? Day one, one of the first things you fucking said to me, the only thing holding you in is that tummy tuck. Why would you fucking say that to me? And then I told you right off the fucking bat that, like, not to do these things to me, right? I tried to get you to not do it, not say these things to me, not to touch me the way you were. But you knew everything about me. You knew the way my body worked, the way my pain disorder worked, the way the inputs of my body worked, right? You knew that you didn't even fucking have to touch me. You could touch my hip, my shoulder, my back. You knew the right amount of pressure that everything took. I told you. You figured everything out. I mean, you knew everything. And for what? Just stroke your own ego that you could do these things? I just don't get it. I don't get why. I mean, what did you tell the police? That on January 23rd, when I told you that you had given me an orgasm in previous sessions, that you told me that if I had ever say that again to you, that you were going to give me a new physical therapist, that it was inappropriate? Well, I hate to inform you, Jason, but I actually have you on recording doing the exact opposite, okay? I think your statement to me was, so I sent you home nice and warmed up. That was the statement you made to me. So no, you didn't say that. You continued making comments to me. And not only that, at the beginning of that session, I asked you not to do it to me again. On several occasions, I asked you not to do it to me again. But you continued to do it. And you continued to make the comments. You continued to ask me if I was having sexual partners and other things. Why did you continue poking at me and prodding me? What were you getting out of it? What? I don't understand why any of this had to happen. I was fine, and I was doing okay. But you knew everything. And you continued to push. And what was I supposed to do? And you knew that I was unhappy. And you knew that things were not great here because I shared that information with you. And you knew how my body worked because you're my healthcare provider, and I shared that information with you. And you knew all about my background because I shared that information with you too. You had all of the information, and you took advantage of it. And I confided in you. And I felt safe with you. And you used all of that. And now what? And now here I am, alone, without anything. I have no medical care. And I have no fucking pain management. You fucking held my pain management over my head. And you used it. Even after recertification and putting in my notes that I needed another 6 sessions, you still wouldn't let me make appointments. You still held that over my head. I was at your beck and call. You would email me. I have an open appointment. Take it or leave it, basically, was the thing. It was all so subtle that anybody looking from the outside wouldn't be able to see it.
PTSD is a lasting ailment that affects a staggeringly large number of people worldwide. It's a very serious and horrific thing for anyone to endure, and while treatable, the symptoms rarely ever entirely go away. Rather, the individual is given the tools to understand the ailment, and ultimately, how to cope. Generally speaking, PTSD is a trigger-based anxiety born from traumatic experience, generally something like an automobile accident or a natural disaster or a singular, violent confrontation. An individual suffering from PTSD will often regress into an anxiety-ridden state when faced with situations that remind them of their trauma. Unlike simply remembering something horrific, people who suffer from PTSD will often be brought back entirely to the trigger moment, feeling all the fear, anxiety, pain, and hurt that they did initially. Because of this, the coping mechanisms associated with PTSD are often hypervigilant and reactive, with towering walls built around them as protection from the potential for repeat trauma. The individual may separate themselves from people, places, or thoughts that remind them of the incident, and in broad sweeping ways. Things like a smell, the way someone says something, how things on a desk are arranged. The smallest of things can be major triggers for someone suffering from PTSD. C-PTSD, or complex post-traumatic stress disorder, is a relatively new field and shares many core symptoms with PTSD. Both take many sessions with psychiatric professionals to properly diagnose and assess. However, C-PTSD is much harder to identify, as those suffering from C-PTSD experience a much larger and broad range of symptoms, which can often be confused with other mental ailments like depression, bipolar disorder, and antisocial personality disorder. Generally speaking, the key differences between the two is the length of time an individual has experienced the trauma. While PTSD is classified as a singular or short-term traumatic event, C-PTSD is born from long-term, repeated trauma, like a soldier may experience while deployed, or abuse. Because of this, an individual experiencing C-PTSD generally has a much lower self-esteem, a persistent negative image of themselves coupled with toxic guilt and shame. In many cases, the individual might seek out unhealthy or abusive relationships because they feel that is what they deserve, as it might have been all they've ever known. They might have heightened mistrust in others and have extraordinary trouble with relationships, both friendly and romantic, exacerbated by an inability to regulate emotions. Small hills are perpetual mountains, and an individual might be constantly in wait for what they believe is an inevitable breaking of trust and boundary. And even if it never happens, someone affected by C-PTSD will safeguard themselves from the potential blowout, sometimes in destructive and chaotic ways. There are 4 categories that psychologists have generalized what someone going through PTSD and C-PTSD may experience. A very generalized list of only 4 things, boiled down to the most instinctual of action, the 4 Fs. Fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. With all 4, the key descriptions are broad-sweeping, as the branching symptoms from any of them are far-reaching and in many cases all-encompassing, influencing an individual's every thought and action. Fight can be described as an individual's defensive mindset, fists cocked, ready to attack, and often preemptively, fully entrenched in their world and perspective. And regardless of the situation they're in, may it be one of goodwill or bad, it's the expectation of the worst that clouds everything else, and a twisted mentality of the best defense being a great offense takes over. Gaslighting is a common knee-jerk reaction for fight. Flight is the opposite of fight. An individual will rarely let any person get too close, always held at arm's length or further, if allowed in at all. A person exhibiting the flight symptom may make innocent plans with a friend, only to completely disappear, missing planned events, ignoring phone calls and texts. Flight could be described as an individual's desire to distance themselves as far as they can from any potential hurt, their preference for regular or even permanent isolation outweighing that for social engagement. Freeze might entail somebody's inability to act, a kind of extreme wallflower, unable or unwilling to speak or engage, walk or run away. An individual might be frozen in place, their mind afire with racing thought, but externally blank. Someone might try to be friendly or converse, but the individual will not react, and if they do, the response is likely the farthest thing from what the affected individual had hoped to say. Freeze can be loosely related to symptoms of extreme fear, where someone is frozen in place, paralyzed under high-stress situations. Fawn is closely linked to unhealthy obsession, a kind of overcompensation, a doting, where one might openly place themselves lower than their peers, a representation of self-image. An individual might display exaggerated flattery or affection, be obsequious in nature, overly obedient or attentive to an excessive degree, waiting on text responses for minutes or hours without putting the phone down, always agreeing to what the other party wants regardless of their own desires. They will be emphatic and eager to please, even if it's at their own cost. The binding trait amongst all 4 of the Fs is trust. Major advances in mental therapies like cognitive behavior therapy or CBT greatly help an individual to change the way they think about their trauma, relieving the intense anxiety that someone suffering from PTSD can experience. CBT is the most widely used therapy, although it is not infallible and might not work for everybody. Some people suffering from these trauma-based ailments might never fully recover, although that is typically only in the most extreme of cases. There is hope. Julie Merar, like most individuals affected by trauma, exhibited all of the 4 Fs. It's unclear why, but when the dream life Julie was living started to crumble away, so came the separation of her and her husband, Slavi. It was a mutual break, a sort of on-again, off-again separation with very little animosity. It was more of an open marriage where they both lived in separate homes. The pair would continue to share the responsibility of raising their children, where Julie would take during the week and Slavi on the weekends. Like any mother, having the lion's share of rearing her kin was very important, and Julie was not going to give up the right to raise her children in her own image. She was a good mother, loving and attentive, and Julie's core values, the created person that she herself valued, was almost always on the surface, especially around her children. Weekends, or when she let her hair down. Although in her 40s, she would completely capitalize on the wonder years of adulthood, frequenting clubs, partying at bars, cruising town in search of suitors, to which she claimed she's never had trouble with and has had many. Julie was not shy about what motivated her in her own life, and would exploit her petite beauty and magnetic smiles to the fullest extent.
Like I said, it's different, you know. I'm super fucking picky. I'm not gonna hop onto Tinder or some bullshit like that. That's not who I am. And it's kind of like, I have to be able to trust somebody. I'm not just gonna, you know, look at it this way. I don't want a relationship. I just want sex, you know? And it's like, it's transactional for me, but look at it this way. I don't want a relationship with my surgeon, but I have to be able to trust him, right?
Yeah, I get it.
Same thing.
At some point, Julie was injured, a serious fracture and deviation of her hip. The hip is critical for almost every moving action, walking, sitting, standing up. When a hip is injured, the pain can be insurmountable and persistent. Julie immediately sought out treatment and was able to find and secure a reputable practitioner that would help alleviate and remedy the pain. And physical therapy certainly helped, and in the short term, she felt herself able to walk and even sometimes run, twist and turn, all the little things that the healthy take for granted. And then, as treatment progressed, all of the 4 F's began to creep their way in. Pleasant sessions fell away to fawning, and then freezing, a temporary flight, ending with a lengthy and explosive fight. She became infatuated with the practitioner, and with that, overstepped many boundaries. And when the PT did not respond, Julie became rash and unpredictable, making bold and false claims about her therapist, threatening him, stalking him, and made everyone at the clinic at least a little scared of exactly what Julie could be capable of. Ultimately, her treatment was terminated, and she was asked not to come back, under threat of trespass or more severe charges. Even then, the harassment allegedly continued, until many months later, when it suddenly just stopped. Julie was now left alone with her injury, which she claims with conviction is the source of severe and debilitating chronic pain. Strangely, she would not immediately seek out a new practitioner. At a new clinic, reputable and clean, filled with capable practitioners and littered with positive reviews, treatment initially went as planned. Julie would attend the weekly sessions and saw great improvement. The new physiotherapist was attentive, experienced, and truly cared for Julie's well-being. He listened to her, adapted at-home exercises to fit her lifestyle, invested in her well-being, all the while trying to help Julie feel listened to. And like any person would, Julie felt good with all the positive action. Importantly, and by Julie's own admission, physical contact was almost always arousing to her, even with the most innocent of brush-bys. Emotional connection came quickly for Julie, and she would once again mistake the physiotherapist's actions as more than professional investment. Simple things like innocent conversation or physical aid heightened Julie's desire to be wanted and recognized. She became convinced the PT was echoing her desire. He wasn't. Each session became gradually more and more uncomfortable, although the PT remained professional, keeping a safe distance when needed, without sacrificing the attentive focus that a good PT requires. But Julie felt slighted, played. She was convinced that the PT was simply toying with her delicate emotion. She had opened up entirely to him, told him the most intimate details of her life. Lust or confused attachment quickly turned to resentment. Julie began concocting a plan, a vicious and misguided series of actions aimed at cornering the PT. Step 1 was to secretly record the PT sessions, to gather proof that he was acting inappropriately, to have definitive evidence that he was doing more than just assisting her with her stretches and exercises.
You're ready for skull. Is that a rabbit skull? What is that?
Oh, Chihuahua.
Chihuahua?
It's my pet. I don't know.
And there's a bee above it there?
Yes. We could avoid any the outcome of last time. That would help too.
The outcome?
Yeah. So that yeah.
Alright, let me know if anything is not comfortable. Or whatever.
It was more than comfortable, so let's avoid that outcome.
Okay, alright.
Do you guys do Eve's lunge a lot? Do hip flexor?
Yes.
Lunge?
Carrie, this is stuff. Not run into the same issue as the last time. I figure I probably do not need to enlighten you.
I just want your hip feeling better, girl.
That was not the only thing that felt better. Twice.
You like pain.
Yeah.
But the PT was never that way. He never made advances, and was always focused on treatment, the first few recordings showcasing exactly that. And so began the coaxing, the baiting. Julie's conversation became much more specific, leading the parley with blatantly forward advances, gathering highly subjective ammunition to ultimately use against him. The PT, blind to the recordings, was more confused than anything, with Julie angrily denying previously held conversations in some. In others, she moans in ecstasy during assisted stretches. In most, she throws herself at him, the invitational door to Julie's weekend of sinning opened so wide it was off the hinges.
No, I got to. Like, please don't write down anything that I say. Actually, I'm already in a movie, but you know, like legitimately, I'm like actually already in a movie, but that's, you know, like I'm already in one. So, but it will be my movie next time.
Yes.
I'm not like in somebody else's movie.
Okay. So let's see what we can do here. Just trying to work. So we like obviously we move towards the range of motion, and it hurts, right? We gotta find a way to get you to move. So you could also go into like hands and knees, slightly wider, rocking back. See if we get a little something.
Work on it for a little bit.
I did.
That was nothing. You were like barely. You were very late. That's not my fault.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You need to make up for that.
I don't need to make up for that.
Please.
I understand. I'm not today. Maybe you should see Nadia. See if there's something she can help you with.
She doesn't work anymore.
She doesn't?
No. She quit PT after her last kid.
Okay. Grab something.
If you did not know the context of her actions, The audio could easily be misconstrued. The lack of visual context while listening to the recordings certainly makes what Julie had hoped to capture a plausible scenario. However, the office, like most physio centers, is an open concept, with each treatment room being a part of a much larger room, divided by curtains or separated by only angles. These floor plans are thought out, a countermeasure against accusations from disgruntled patients exactly like Julie. The first therapy session recorded was on January 23rd and continued all the way to March 21st. I have all the recordings, but have decided not to use them in their entirety in this episode. They do little more than stir a frenzy and would not help the narrative in the way I hope. They can all be summed up with a breakdown of only one of the sessions. Julie was a creature of habit, and much of what she said and did during her PT was repeated session after session.
I feel like I could get some of the same effect from running. No?
I don't know. Could do other things during the day, but also release tension. Just saying. Oh God, this is like no. This is not gonna work. This is not gonna work.
Too much pain?
Nope, absolutely not. So, yeah.
Okay, not too much pain.
No, not too much pain at all. It's like this is just not gonna work.
Evidence gathered, Julie would eventually approach the PT with her feelings and twisted perception about their relationship. To the PT, it was nothing more than professional, but to Julie, she had led her on, reciprocating romantic agenda, suggesting the physical treatment the PT administered was somehow more than assisted stretches and muscle manipulation. The PT immediately ended their sessions, and Julie would spin wildly out of control, forcing the PT and center to bar her from entry under threat of trespass. This would not stop Julie, however, and she would find new and inventive ways to intrude upon the PT's life. Like the recordings, she would plan her attacks. They were calculated, coaxing and baiting, hoping for some kind of reaction. She called him at home, made horrific claims to his wife, accosted his family. And what could the PT do but distance himself further, the action of which only inspired a chaotic desperation within Julie, a turmoil that persisted, nagged and nagged until she makes the trauma-driven choice to move from fawn to fight, and utilized the full scope of her online prowess to begin a campaign against her former practitioner, much like she did before with her first physical therapist. A website titled under the PT's name was created, a multi-paged, very skewed dissertation on the PT, written in the first person, as if from the PT's perspective. Included was his place of work, notes on his personal life, a heavily biased breakdown of Julie's physical therapy sessions, openly accusing the PT of sexual misconduct, and with vicious intent. The website was thankfully taken down quickly, although the damage to the PT was far-reaching on many different levels. With all other avenues failing, Julie makes a wild decision to approach the PT, once again without warning, although this time she did it with a gun.
Why did you do this to me? And when I finally decided to do something and take control of the situation in some way, right? You decided you didn't like it? Where did you think that this was going? That you would just constantly poke at me through all these sessions? You would have your fun, you would control everything? I don't get it. You couldn't just stand up and say no to me? From one session You're okay with me sticking my hand between your legs? And then the next session, you're not okay with me closing the door. I don't understand. With no boundaries and no rules, you just get to do whatever you want. And then I get punished. And I'm the one that winds up like this. And I know that what I did in the end was not okay. And if you don't think that I am so ashamed of what I did, I can't ever come back from that. But here's the thing. Remember I said, I'm still here? Well, if you're seeing this, I'm not still here. Not at all. I want you to know that when I came to the parking lot, not only was that firearm not loaded, it was completely disarmed. There was no ammunition because there was no clip in it. That clip was back in the hotel room. That clip was meant for me. I only brought that with because, Jesus Christ, you were 6'2" and 190 pounds. You had already yelled at me in a session and swore at me. I had threatened your job, threatened your marriage. I have no clue what you would have done to me. Would you have pushed me? I'm 4'9" and currently weighing in at 88 pounds. So I have no clue what you would have done to me. That was for my protection. Just hopefully the sight of it, I don't know, you seem very upper crust white bread. So that was for my protection. But all I wanted to do was talk to you. I just wanted to find out why the fuck you did what you did to me.
Julie would make 9 of these videos, all of them running strange circles around vicious accusations, all aimed at toppling her perceived aggressor while threatening suicide. Julie's formative years and the trauma she experienced most certainly had an effect on her actions, guiding her thoughts and creating an irrational mindset. It's safe to assume that the world she created was a delicate one, a very thinly paned glass castle. And with one tiny crack, it quickly shattered.
Because I destroyed everything for myself. Once again. Because I know that I'm never going to be in the place that I was and have the same management over my body and my pain that I did ever again. Never. I'll never be in such a good place again. I don't want to know what my future looks like. Because there's no future for me. There isn't. There's nothing for me. Nothing. But this, Jason, this is at least partially your fault. I don't know why you chose me. Why? Something you've never had? Difference? I don't know. And it doesn't even fucking matter. You shouldn't have played with me. It's not fair. I'm not gonna make the same mistakes that I've made in the past. Nope. I'm covering all my bases this time. All my bases. You know, the best thing is, there's not a hospital they can bring me to. I'm banned from North Shore, banned from NCH. There's nowhere they can bring me to. So, I'll just get to die peacefully. Finally. But yeah, just know this is partially on you. My children will grow up without a mother. But that's okay, because I would have done nothing but damage to them anyways. I just wanted to know why. Why couldn't you just let me know why? Why couldn't you just fucking talk to me? Why couldn't you just fucking talk to me? Why couldn't you just fucking get up out of that chair and just say no to me? That's all I wanted to know. Why? Why? Nothing ever had to go this far. I'm sorry that I scared you, Jason. I'm not that kind of person. I've never done anything like that. Never. I've never hurt another human being in my life. I've always only hurt myself. And the fact that I instilled that fear in you, for me, is unforgivable. And I'm sorry. I really am. I can't ever come back from this, ever. I'm so sorry. I'll never forgive myself. Never. There's no coming back for me. It was irredeemable. So, there's nothing else for me to say. This is already like way too long of a video. If I were you, I wouldn't watch this whole thing. I don't know. But all I wanted to know was why. Why you chose me. Why you targeted me. I hope that like someday you'll be able to be honest and admit what you did. Honestly, just please at least admit what you did. That yeah, you did have a situationship, whatever you want to call it. You did these things on purpose. But I know you won't. You're not going to put your job, your licensing, your marriage, or anything else in jeopardy. Alright? But that's okay. The audio's out there. People can listen to it, they can hear it. I'll make it available. Whatever. I just think that it's really shitty that men like you get to get away with everything. I just, like, did your manager delete that phone call? The voicemail that I left? Did she ever tell you that I left it? Whatever happened. You said you were sorry that when I was younger that nobody ever helped me. And that people ignored me when I spoke up about the abuse that I suffered. The sexual abuse. And everything else that I suffered in my life. So when I called and left a voicemail on your clinic manager's system, what happened then? Did I just get ignored again? Like, was it just the same system that protected everybody else? Protecting you?
The 9 goodbye videos were taken down, presumably by Julie herself, and things seemed to quiet down, on the surface at least. Months would pass, and as court dates for Julie's previous transgressions drew near, she would once again fall into her erratic and unpredictable ways, reposting the videos once again, her magnus opus. This time, however, things were different, and Julie would actually disappear, sending waves of concern to those who knew her. Julie could be unpredictable, yes, but in very predictable ways, and she would never leave her kids behind. Panic was warranted.
Hey, well, I just, wanted to take a minute and be able to say goodbye to everybody. Anybody who knows me knows that I have struggled with depression and suicide for my entire life. And I have lost that battle. And I am so sorry to anybody that I have let down and anybody that I have disappointed. I'm so sorry, but I just couldn't do it anymore. I'm so sorry. But I just couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't wake up another day. I couldn't go to sleep another night. I couldn't deal with the pain anymore. The physical pain I'm in, emotional pain I'm in. I'm so tired of being a fucking disappointment to my fucking family. I'm fucking letting everybody down. I'm being such a fucking fuck up. I'm so fucking tired of it. I just can't fucking do this anymore. I don't know where it all went so fucking wrong. I don't. And every single fucking time, I think I'm gonna make it. After every single fuck up, I get on that path. And I think this time I'm gonna fucking make it, right? Everything starts getting better, right? I get a handle on things. I start doing better, I start doing well. And it's like every single time, as I get older, and the path goes and starts going, and first it's like, I get in the cycle, and it's like 3 years, then it's 5 years, and then it's 7 years, and then it's 10 years, and it's like this path just elongates. But it doesn't make a difference. I cannot fucking escape who I am. And I can't fucking escape the person that my circumstances and my life has created. What, next time it'll be 15 years? Do I have another fucking 15 years in me? I don't fucking think so.
And I don't have any energy left for this. And I can't go through this again. I just fucking can't. And I'm so sorry to everybody I've let down. I'm not this kind of person. I'm just so sorry. And I'm so sorry that I'm so fucking weak. And that I can't fucking fight anymore. But I just can't do it. I'm just so fucking broken. And I'm in so much fucking pain. I can only handle one kind of pain at a time. Physical or emotional. And I can't handle the fucking two together. I don't know. I really don't. I'm so fucking sorry. Please. Don't be angry. Don't be sad. Don't be anything. I don't know. I'm just so fucking sorry. I thought that this time I was gonna make it. But I'm just so fucking stupid. I always fuck up. I just do. I don't have the energy to come back from this fuck up. And I'm just so tired. And I can't get up in the mornings. And I can't go to bed. And I can barely fucking eat. And I don't want to fucking do it anymore. And I'm damaging everybody around me. My husband, my kids, my friends. I'm just a fucking drain on everybody. And I can't. I didn't want this to happen. I didn't. I don't know what else to say. I know that it's final. But I just want everything to stop. I'm not sure if any of my pain has ever gone away. I think I've just always been really good at hiding it. It's always been just below the surface. But I'm just too tired to fight. I mean, I've fucked up in the past, but this changes the course of everything. And you motherfucker. You fucking broke me, you asshole. To save yourself, your job, your reputation, you think it's okay to fucking break the rules, ethics, whatever you want to fucking call it. Blame the victim. Fuck you. You fucking destroyed me. Because you can keep going on and saying you didn't do anything wrong, and that's fine. Fucking... You keep believing that. That's fine. Abuse the abuse victim, right? You just fucking broke me. You tear everything apart. I just... Fuck. Just know that it was the best thing I could do for myself. I didn't want to stay in pain anymore. I just couldn't be. I probably never should have been anyways. Right. Ugh, fuck. Fuck. Goodbye. I truly love you all. This is not a life worth living for me. No, it's not a battle that I want to fight. I can't do it anymore. Goodbye.
A missing persons report is issued almost immediately. It's unclear about Julie's intention in running away. Perhaps she just wanted a break from her reality, an escape from the turmoil she created. Or maybe she was trying to convince the world she actually did follow through with her threats. It is certain that she fled to Florida, and while there, she did not contact anyone. She hid away in an off-track motel and stayed silent. No one would have ever known what had happened to her, except for one thing. She used her credit card. Julie's name was flagged, and for more than one reason. She was a missing person whose erratic actions had both friends and authorities concerned. In the state to which those closest to her saw her, coupled with the alarming goodbye videos posted to YouTube, Julie was considered a very real threat, and not only to herself. Everyone was on the lookout. It's unclear from when the warrant was issued, or if it was because of missed court dates from her previous run-ins with her former practitioner, but it somehow reached across states all the way to Florida from Illinois. Unlawful vehicular invasion, where she was accused of violently reaching into the victim's car in an attempt to take their cell phone, presumably to try and stop them from filming her breakdown. Police arrived at the motel and waited for Julie to leave. As she exited her room, deputies approached her, and Julie immediately went for the gun hidden in her pocket. An undercover officer quickly intervened and stopped the handgun from being fully drawn, although it was loaded and went off in the struggle, thankfully missing everyone who was present. Julie was taken into custody and transported to HCA Lake Monroe for psychiatric evaluation before being released back to the authorities and taken to Seminole County Jail, where she is currently awaiting trial for 3 charges: the original unlawful vehicular invasion, and now attempted first-degree premeditated murder of a law enforcement officer and aggravated assault of a peacekeeper. She has not been released on bond, and it is likely due to the nature of her charges, specifically the alleged attempted murder of a law enforcement officer. It is also highly likely that, because of this charge, Julie will spend the majority of her remaining life behind bars. Thank you once again for watching or listening, and thank you for your patience while I completed this episode. I admit this episode or entire series has taken far longer than I had envisioned and hoped, and I apologize for the delay. The content of this trilogy is held close to home for many, but I wanted to ensure that I told this tale with compassion and tact. In a way, I feel like I did not write this documentary. The trials and tribulations of the people of Synanon, Elan, and all the other similar institutions have truly written themselves, and thankfully found a strong voice amongst those who would listen. I leaned heavily on a few of these giants, a handful of which I was fortunate enough to meet along the way, and I want to thank everyone for the help and insight that was offered. Trauma in all its forms is a horrific thing, and we will never know the extent of what one might be feeling. We only see what makes it to the surface, all that creates the cycle that threatens to be perpetual unless treated. It can be hard for people stuck in this trauma to seek out help, for any number of reasons. And to you, I want you to know that help is out there. You're not alone, and a better day awaits you. I have a Patreon, linked both at the end of this episode and in the descriptions box, and it's the sole source of income for this channel. It's home to my beloved producers, a major driving force behind each episode. I have a growing list of free members who did not make this shout out, but I wanted to thank you for your support, however you can give it. I would also like to extend a very big thank you to my existing patrons who have stuck around through this LPR dry spell in between episodes. You're all legends. Thank you. Joy Whitman, Pixie, John Rodman, Jaleel, Morena, Saloma Simmons, and Sean Bailey. Welcome back. Thank you, thank you, thank you. As I've been doing, here's the next channel I would like to showcase, and if anyone, Kyle, Dire Trip, deserves it. Dire Trip has a keen narrative style coupled with appropriate music and immaculate research. He brings to you tragic tales of true crime and internet subculture in such a gripping and enticing way. He's a champion in the community, always ready to lend a helping hand or give direction when a fellow creator is lost, and this philanthropic way about Kyle truly comes through in his own channel. His back catalog is huge and diverse. There are a wide range of videos to keep you rooted when you are searching for the dark side of humanity. Truth be told, this is one of the few true crime channels I watch regularly and can recommend it with confidence. If you make it there, be sure to subscribe and say hello from LPR.
The family was prevented from identifying her, being told, "She's unidentifiable. You can't see her body." At first, given how out of character this was for Nikki and how erratic her driving was, people wondered if she had been on some sort of substance at the time of her driving.
I always say that maybe it's time to start looking for help with the channel, although to be honest, I would not even know where to begin with that. Marketing, for a certainty, but truth be told, I'm almost entirely blind when it comes to most things online. It's also overwhelming to me. Until I overcome my fear of releasing some control to let this channel breathe and spread its wings a little, the most I can hope is that if you like what you saw, you'll subscribe, leave a comment, and of course, hit that like button. Those three things are entirely free and help the channel in monumental ways. Thank you. Until next time, thank you once again for joining me for this, Season 4, Episode 4 of Something Criminal.
Where thoughts bend reality, and the heart exposes all its fragility, where acknowledgement and denial are conflicting. And all that is true is left to be contradicted. Where past and future hide, where love and hate collide, where innocence of youth lingers, and growth slips through your fingers. Vulnerability reveals an inner mirror, reflecting all that's missed, just to make it clearer. What a haunted call is missing.